Thanks again for jumping on the call today. I know, I've been trying to do something collaborative with everybody, but, with this whole thing going around, it's kind of hard to see anyone. But I did want to get both of your input on a lot of things. One, because I haven't talked to you much in a while. And I thought it'd be kind of interesting to do about the quarantine and the working musicians. And another thing about learning songs. I've had a lot of people asking me about how I learn songs and how different people learn songs. And I thought it'd be good to have you both jump on here, because between the three of us either collaborating together, or me and Tom, or Tom and me, or Mike, or something like that, or us together when we were playing for like a couple shows, and on our own, there's a lot of different things you can do with learning songs, and different people learn different ways. So there's different ways that I learn it, and when somebody asked me that, my first thought was like, well, how do I do it? And I'm like, well, I know a lot of people that do this themselves as well too, and they might have better ways, or just different ways of doing things. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So suppose we could start on that for a while. So, like, Mike, you learn like a lot of different songs. I'm always hearing you do different songs on your Facebook page, and you're always doing open mics, and you do different versions of different songs, and not all of which are like simple pop songs. You're doing like Norah Jones songs with all these different crazy chords and stuff like that. So if you had to say, like, are there any things that you do, for instance, you hear a song on the radio or somebody tells you a song, do you have like a process or something that goes through your head for when you actually figure out, well, here's song number one, how am I going to learn this thing? Like, is there a certain thing you do, or is it different every time?
There's a bit of a process. I mean, it's really, really fluid depending on the song, but the first thing I do, like right out of the gate, I listen to the damn song. Mm-hmm. I listen to it many times over. I sing it along. I try to hear the patterns that are in it, and just evaluate whether or not that song is a good fit for me. Right. So a lot of times there's songs that I absolutely love, but I don't play them well or sing them well for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Just not your style or your range or something like that?
Absolutely, or just whatever, my stage presence. It can be a bunch of different things. And it doesn't really matter how much I love it. I absolutely love so many songs that I never play out for that reason. It's just not going to come across well.
Sure, and that's a normal thing, and Tom and I have gone through that a lot of times, because we'll bounce things back and forth either between, doing things in 4 stories, or him and I talking about doing things for open mic, where we'll say, well, how does this sound? Well, and I'll say, well, how does that one sound? We'll bounce things back and forth, and sometimes it might be a great song, but it just doesn't fit the way that we do things, or one of us might not be the most comfortable with it, so we bounce it back and forth. So that's always like a first... I don't know, Tom, you can speak up on that if you want to. That's always like a first pass to see if everybody wants to do that, and we're comfortable enough playing it, I think.
Yeah, and it has to do a lot, too, with the instrumentation, mm-hmm. in my view, the instrumentation and the arrangement of the song.
Yeah, like, definitely.
You may hear a song on the radio, and you're like, I love this song, but you don't realize, like, the keys and the bass are actually central to the song, and the guitar is actually more of the rhythm, right?
Sure,
or almost percussion, right? So,
or if there's a horn section or something crazy that we're all like, how are we going to do this?
It's absolutely critical. The song, requires two pieces in it, and if you're just, an acoustic guitar and you or whatever, it's going to feel empty, and so a song really has to feel full for me to even want to tackle it. Just. Right. Me or the guitar, or I got to mess around with the arrangement, and that's more of an effort and energy type of thing.
Right. No, I totally agree, and it's just, I agree with that too. If there's a certain song, and like for instance a song on the radio that people are used to hearing, and we're going to be playing that because it's a popular song and people are used to hearing it, you want them to. It's either got to be. My thing's always been like anything creative, either music or art. It's got to sound damn near close to the original. Or it's got to be completely different and completely your own version, because if you do it kind of like the original, but not quite, then it sounds wrong, and then it doesn't, and then people don't like it. You either have to do like a whole like a reggae version of it or something crazy like that, or you have to pretty much nail it pretty good. It's kind of hard. That in between stuff doesn't always. I haven't always seen it go over well, And to your point, if it's something that doesn't fit our instrumentation or the way we can do things, sometimes might be, well, let's just do a different version of it, like our own version of it, and that might work. But like you said, the first pass is to see if we actually can pull it off, respectably, and do some justice to it, where people will even know what the original song is, and to take it that way. I think that's a pretty good way to look at it for the first pass.
Yeah, I agree. There is a lot of gray area in there. So think about that, like the song that you've covered in different bands. in a song that I'm currently covering now, Carry On My Wayward Son.
Mm-hmm. Great song, by the way.
Right?
And another one, certainly not a simple 4-chorder either.
Right. So, mainly it's just me and my acoustic. That's where I'm at right now, not in any band. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I love the song, and I knew, like, some of the riffs I never covered in the band. And it's like, I'll sit down and just learn this one all the way through. And it was one of those who cares things. It's something that I should know just as a guitarist, right?
Right.
And I went through listening to songs, and I thought, well, let's look at different acoustic covers. And I found one that I really liked. And a lot of them fell along those lines. So the first thing when you're covering it with an acoustic is you are not doing what the band's doing. But still, if you want the song to come off, you have to get all the riffs right. And you have to get, like, the basic structure of the song in the right places, played with basically the same dynamics. And after that, even if you get it right, it might not come out well. So I went and tried it out a couple times, and people seemed to like it, so it stayed in my mix.
Right.
But my preference and the feedback that I get is, like, it was difficult for me to recognize it at first. Like, okay, well, that's fair. But you still, any acoustic song, when you're arranging it that way, there are parts that you have to get that on regardless. You got to get the riffs right, or the hook if there is one, that sort of thing.
Right. That's a good thing. So first of all, I think like you both got some pretty good points as to, your first pass of it, making sure you're comfortable with it, you're ready, you're preparing yourself to actually get into the song. So the next part would actually be figuring out the chords and all that. And I do it differently every time. Sometimes I figure out the bass line first. Well, first of all, I will say sometimes when we pick a new song, it'll be something that I've kind of known pretty well. I can hear it in my head, but I just never really try to figure it out. So that's always helpful because I'm kind of familiar with it. And to your point, Mike, if it's something that I've just never heard before, and sometimes Tom and I have run across songs that we wanted to do for an open mic or for the band or something like that, and Tom or Mark will bring the song up, and I'll be like, I've never heard of that before. So the first thing I will do is I will go listen to it a bunch of times to that point, to that I pretty much know it all in my head. I can tell because this is the intro, verse, chorus, there's a break, there's a longer like pre-chorus right there, and there's a solo, and here's the outro, that kind of thing. So I kind of like format it in my head. And then at that point, there's usually like 3 or 4 different parts to it, and they just repeat. Like, here's the chorus part, and here's the rhythm part, here's the verse part, here's an intro. Maybe the intro kind of is plays at the outro too. Maybe it's a break or something. So I break it down into sections, and once you break it down like that, there's only a few different parts, and then you enhance those parts for different dynamics or whatever it is. And sometimes my next part is like I'll either try to figure out the bass line usually I can hear the bass line in my head or chords. So I'll figure out the bass line quick, and then usually for most songs I can kind of hear what the progression is in my head. I might not be able to tell you what key it is exactly right by listening to it, but I can pretty much tell what the progression is going to be as far as like a Nashville numbering system. I can tell it's going to like a 1-3-5 or something like that. Not sure what key it is, but I can tell once I find that bass note, I can tell what the rest of it's going to fall into and what I'm pretty much going to have to solo over and what the notes are. So for me, that's what I do is I kind of hear the progressions in my head, and I can figure out, and then once I find the bass notes or the key for it, then the rest of it kind of falls into place for the most part. Tom, like me and you and I have learned a lot of different songs right off the cuff for a lot of open mics and band stuff. Do you have like a certain process for learning things that you've never heard of before? Like, do you look at the bass line first, or do you go look for the tabs, or just listen to it, or anything in particular that you normally do, or is it different every time?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think you probably know this about me. Which is the first thing that I do, kind of going back to the first thing Mike said, is I go listen to the song, and honestly, like, because we put so much work into learning a song, if the song doesn't kind of immediately connect with me in like 1 or 2 listens, and it's going to end up in a set list for potentially a long time,
yeah,
I actually kind of make a pretty quick decision of like, I don't want to learn this song.
Right. It's not. Well, that's a great point. Then it's not worth it. There's no point in the trouble. Let's learn something better. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to derive enjoyment out of playing music, or like literally, there's no point to doing it. So
totally agree.
So lots of times, I mean, we've amassed hundreds of songs that in playing together, you, me, or Mark, or when we play with Mike, like if somebody's not in on the song, then it doesn't mean that they have to have heard it before, but they have to immediately kind of have some sort of connection, whether it's this particular turn or the chorus or something
right.
that they can connect with, because otherwise it just is work, and you can't kind of bring a song to life if you're working and laboring at it. You can hear it when you're playing it, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
that's kind of the first thing, is you just have to have that connection. And then it's kind of figuring out which piece of the song you kind of connect with. And I can usually, lots of times it's like the hook or something like that. But you got to find a piece of the song you can connect with. And I find that even when I'm, particularly with singing, like you've got to find the piece of the song when you're singing in particular that you kind of connect with, and then you kind of build it out from there in terms of what's kind of the tone, what's the style, that sort of thing. And then you kind of build off that piece throughout the rest of the song, because there's always an area of the song where you're going to be like, this doesn't feel right, or it feels a little wonky, so you really got to kind of deconstruct it and figure that piece of it out, and then kind of put it back together again. So I used to when I was playing acoustic guitar, do a lot of tabs.
Okay.
And because I didn't have the ear, good enough of an ear for it. And then I started playing bass, and I did that completely by ear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, since we haven't been playing quite as much, and I picked up my acoustic recently to play for the kids, I found that my ability to learn songs by ear on the acoustic guitar is now like substantially better. And I'm actually enjoying it, playing it more now, because there's less kind of labor involved. I can actually just kind of pick it up and play it, which has been really enjoyable. I've been able to play songs I could never play in the past, just because I can easily kind of figure them out by nature of doing that with the bass. And that kind of forced me to build that muscle or that skill. So it's kind of changed, I should say, over the years. And I'm really, it's more of, I feel more connected to the guitar now, and it feels more kind of intuitive and natural.
That's a great point, because I feel kind of similar. I played bass in a band for like one or two gigs when I was younger, and my thought was like, well, I'm kind of a guitar player, but I'll play bass for it. And at that time, I just pretty much played bass like a guitar player. I was picking and doing certain things like that, and it was very, very simple. And then I was playing with another band, and I was actually had to be a bass player. I was doing like slap stuff, and I had to learn like pretty intricate bass lines, and it was a pretty good challenge. But after putting the guitar down for about a good month and playing it, it seemed like 40 hours a week I was playing bass, and I was touring for a while, I actually kind of got it. I understood what bass was, and I was like, wow, this is like a whole different instrument. And it's a really, really cool instrument. And I could just put my guitar away for like a few years and just get really into this bass thing. And I think listening to the bass more than I did before, and actually playing it and understanding it made me a much better guitar player. I could, like to your point, I would hear things better, because I'm like, no, instead of just learning all these, or instead of just listening to all these guitar parts and the chords and all these intricate things and the solos, which is a lot of stuff to listen to, I'm just listening to the bass, which is more simple. It doesn't mean it's easier, but it's a little more simple, and it's a little more prominent usually, and it's something that your ear can pick out. So when you get used to listening to the bass and you can use that towards guitar, that seemed to help me greatly, it sounds like what you're kind of saying too.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like I said, it has made me that learning the bass was kind of something I had to do out of requirement. And so, and I didn't know how to read bass music, so I literally just had to learn it, right? Like I just had to figure it out, and kind of having to do that and flex a new muscle, it created that ability that I was able to carry over to the guitar. It was an unintended outcome,
an accidental.
Which I'm pretty happy with. Yeah, exactly.
Nice, that's awesome. So, Mike, what about you? Like when you're always coming up with new songs. Is there a certain thing that you listen for first in a song? Do you listen to the bass? Do you listen to the chords? Do you listen to the patterns, like the actual progression, and then figure it out from there? Is there a certain thing that you do?
By and large, my knee jerk is I'll listen to the progression. I've learned a lot of songs. One of my first bands was like your band. We did a lot of Beatles songs, just tons. And you'd be drawn. Their progressions were fantastic. So it would start with the basics, and then always the middle eighth. Their structures were they're an education. If you want to play popular music, learn Beatles songs for sure.
Yeah, just the rhythm, the structures, the simplicity, the progressions, all that. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like deceptively simple, because there's so much to it, and they covered so many different styles. And then when they started to mess around and do an awful lot of creative stuff with those progressions, that's when it got really interesting for me. I've always loved progressions, so I'll sit down and I'll start listening, just playing along by ear, and wind up going off. It's like, here's where I think it goes, but let's try this instead. I can easily blow like 2 hours just resolving or leaving chords hanging, whatever. That's really fun for me.
I know you and I have done that more than a few times. Like when we did our songwriter retreats or a few things like that, and we would just sit and I'd play like 3 chords, or I'd say, well, here, Mike, play something else with that, or put some other chord in there, and we would just bounce back and forth as to how you can resolve it, or how you can leave it unresolved, or how you can do something different with it. So that was always and just like any kind of exercise, I think that when you do things like that, that's another thing that kind of helps your ear. It helps you think about things differently and actually think in a creative way, like, where should this go, where can it go, or maybe I'm figuring this song out, and where, now that my head's used to thinking about different directions from this chord to this chord, how is this one song that I'm trying to figure out going? You think about things more a little bit like that, so it's easier to figure them out, I think.
Absolutely. So, left to my own devices, I'll learn a lot of songs that way, just having fun. But I've been a lot more structured, and I put myself in a position where I'm going up at least to an open mic regularly, very often, and I never want to get caught playing the same songs over and over. There are an awful lot of people who do that. It's like, okay, it's your set. They're fantastic, but I've heard all 10 of your songs. Surprise me.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and they don't. So I try to say, okay, I'm learning this one, this one, this one. I'm learning Incubus Drive. Then going slow with it. The progression took me forever just because of the fingering, that sort of deal. So to expedite songs like that, I'll go absolutely to the tabs, or I'll find a tutorial and sit down with that.
Okay.
But I won't spend too much time. A lot of times I find when I'm going off tabs, they don't sound right to me, or they're notated some kind of funky way. So I'll use that as my starting point, especially because I'm going up with just the acoustic, and I've got to make it sound good, as minimal as possible. Right. Once I have the tabs down, and I have the progression and that sort of thing, I'll play it like a million times to get a feel for it and get it set in my fingers, so I can have the luxury of thinking about it while I'm playing it, rather than thinking about what I'm playing.
Right. All right, cool.
So, yeah. Lately it's just tabs or tutorials first. When I'm just playing, just to have the guitar in my hand, I'm just going to, puzzle things out.
That's good. All right, awesome, guys. One last thing for this learning songs. If you had to, all the stuff of playing over decades of playing music and with bands, figuring out songs, if you had to think of any tips that you would either tell your younger self to help you out earlier in your music playing, or if you had to tell a newer player how to figure out songs, or what your recommendations are, any kind of tips for doing that, what would you recommend to do? Any practices or any kind of best practices or things to do? Tom, any ideas from you on that?
Yeah, I definitely wish. I don't have many regrets, if any, but I wish I would have played. I wish I would have had the confidence and just a little bit more of the drive to get out and play with others, because honestly, it's hard to push yourself if you're just playing, to yourself in a room by yourself.
Oh,
right?
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
So getting out and playing in a band, is just kind of world opening in terms of, different instrumentations bring so much, and you actually sound better when you're playing with others that I didn't realize, because you're all kind of filling the space and covering up each other's errors. And, once you start to do that you're going to want to play more. And then when you play more, you're going to get better. And then when you go back and you play alone or just for yourself, you'll just sound better, and you'll just be naturally more confident. So I wish I would have kind of gotten out and played with other people more. It's hard to figure out sometimes how to do that and get over that. It only took me about 5 years of playing with you guys to start feeling a little bit comfortable playing with you guys. But
it does make a big difference, though. Like you said, when you're playing in front of people, it's a huge thing. You're playing in front of.
Musicians are really forgiving, right?
Yeah.
So, it's not like jock. I grew up playing sports, so it's not like jock culture where everyone's trying to put each other down. It's like if someone wants to play music, you're like, that's super cool, and it's a community that tries to build each other up, right? And
absolutely.
They're very interested in what each other is doing. So I wish I would have kind of known that early on.
And there's a familiarity of it as well too, like when you're playing with a band that you've been with for a while. And like, for instance, when the three of us play, you and me and Mark, and if like I happen to make a mistake on stage or something like that, or Mark does or whatever like that, it's not like a nervous thing so much like that. It's like a little, like one of us will look at the other one and kind of like laugh about it. So you have to like, there's a certain amount of that part of the performance part, whereas if you're just up there having a good time, nobody really cares if you did like a quick flub like that and you get back on and you're laughing about it. So that builds up the confidence too, whereas to your point, if you're not playing in front of people and actually understanding how that works, and you're in your basement saying, you know, just by yourself, and that's the only place you've played, you might be thinking, wow, I just don't, if I'm going to play in front of somebody, if this isn't like absolutely perfect, everybody's going to laugh at me, it's going to be a big mess. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And when you actually perform live, you notice that, and to your point, it builds up your confidence, which makes you want to play more, which makes you want to play better, which makes you want to keep doing it, which is all kinds of feeds off each other, and makes you a better musician in the meantime.
Yep.
Mike, any pointers from you? Anything that you wish that you knew when you were younger? Or any tips that you might give?
I was pretty fortunate. I mean, you were there when I started, right? So, great group of people, great group of guys. Everybody we ran into, whether we knew them or not, and we ran into a lot of musicians back then.
Uh-huh.
But they're fantastic. They were good to us. They really and let's face it, we were pretty bad.
But we had fun.
Oh my God. But everybody kept us going, and that was like the key. If it weren't for the kind words back then, I probably would have put it in the closet and it'd still be there. Probably same goes for you, right?
Probably.
So one of the things that I say to anybody who even remotely comes close to asking me is, you know, you sound way better than you think you sound.
Oh, yeah.
Because you do.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can make a noise, if it sounds remotely like the song, you've won. You're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel really safe saying that because I know just that one kind word is going to keep them going. The next 10 times they play it, they'll be even better. But probably the next time they play it, they're going to feel so much more confidence that it's automatically going to come off as better.
Yep. I get that.
And then the last thing is, and it's impossible, but don't focus so much on the things you get wrong. Try to focus more on the things that you're getting right. You can build on your strengths. But if you try to attack your weaknesses, it's just like anything else. You got to build up the foundation first. So don't sweat the things that you're getting wrong. You'll get to it. You really will. It's a process. You have to build up to it.
Right. I agree with that. Build up your strengths. And in the meantime, and by doing that, your weaknesses won't be as weak, and then they won't shine as much, so to speak, and you'll just end up being better, and they'll kind of get forgotten, or they won't be seen as much the more you play.
Sure, absolutely. It's like that song that you've been playing for God knows how many years. At this point, you know it cold. You're not even thinking. So every time you're playing it, you're able to focus on things you've never thought of before while you were playing that song.
Right, exactly.
And that only comes with practice and experience. So when you first started learning that song, it was probably pretty awkward and pretty clunky. But now you can do it in your sleep. So you're adding and putting all this flourish on, and people watch you go, wow, why is he so good? Like, well, practice. He's done it 100 million times. He better be good, right?
And that's it. I see a lot of like newer players on forums are always like, well, you know, I've been playing for 3 months, and I practice maybe 5 minutes a day. What's the easy way to get better? Well, there's no easy way. I wish there was an easy way. If you find it, let me know. But it's just like playing over and over and over again, like hundreds of times. Like some of the songs that I've played, and like Tom and I, you just mentioned Tom. We know. I think I counted it the other day. It was like probably over 1,000 songs that Tom and I have played together at some point or another, or jammed on. And the reason we can play most of them good is because we've played them 1,000 times a piece or something like that. Especially some of them we've just gone over and over and over again, either by practicing or jamming or performing them or something. So the repetitiveness makes it consistent. And once you get it's better to be decent and consistent than kind of all over the place and great at sometimes. It's the consistency that's the main thing. And the only way you can do that, in my point of view, is just muscle memory. You just got to keep doing it, just like any exercise, just like any kind of physical skill. You just have to do it to the point where you're not really thinking about it too much. You're just kind of playing it. It's like second nature, and that's where the consistency comes in, and that's where speed starts building up, and that's when you start getting more. You just start building yourself as a musician, I think.
Pick one or two songs that you absolutely love, no matter what. I mean, I can play the progression for Hotel California and love it every single time. It doesn't even matter. So when I was a kid, I would just play that for hours on end, just because I love that progression. I love how it works. And, you know, you get bored playing it straight, so you'll do it double time, triple time, whatever. It's still just a joy.
I was going to say, yeah, and honestly, the songs where you mess up on are probably the songs that you get so comfortable that your mind does tend to wander or something.
Oh, yeah.
Like the songs that we're trying for the first time, I'm like, we play them nearly flawless because we don't really play them unless we practice them enough that we feel comfortable, and you're super focused to get it done right. It's the one that you've played, you know, 10,000 times where your mind can start to wander a little bit. But it really is that, what's that rule that you got to do something 10,000 hours to be
expert or something, or yeah,
an expert. And I mean, honestly, we played, I think, nearly every week, every 10 days, let's say, for 8 years.
Yeah. And
we were doing the same 100 songs. I mean, because for a while there, we were practicing to play like 4-hour gigs at like a bar or something like that. So it was about 100 songs, something like that, 70 to 100. And I mean, we were practicing the same 100 songs every week for like 3 hours per practice for like 8 years. Like, you're going to get good at those 100 songs if you do that.
Really good, really consistent.
It's just a function of time and effort. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I will talk to you soon.
All righty. Good talking.